Mr. President, the bill that we just passed out of the Senate, a bill to aid the victims of the Superstorm Sandy, was important. It is important then that when we are faced with a disaster, whether it is a hurricane, whether it is an earthquake, whether it is a drought, whether it is a flood, that we step forward and find those ways that we can help citizens who have faced immeasurable loss. And the effort that has gone back and forth between the two bodies now and that will hopefully move forward is one that will certainly help to address the needs of those families that lost so much in Superstorm Sandy. But I think we all recognize that this was not the only disaster that this country faced last year. In my state of Alaska, we faced a fish disaster. Now, for those of you that are from states that do not rely on your fisheries as a source of income, a source of jobs, or really a source of daily sustenance, you might think fish disasters, well, that's not really much to talk about. That's not a true disaster. Well, Mr. President, in my state, when you have a fisheries that has declined to the extent that we have seen, the loss of the Chinook salmon on the Yukon River, on the Kuskokwim River, the Upper Cook Inlet, this had a dramatic impact on our state's economy, a dramatic impact on the livelihoods of so many Alaskans, whether they be commercial fishermen, sport fishermen, our subsistence-based fisheries, our fisheries communities, those businesses that are dependent on our salmon fisheries. These were all impacted this past year. Mr. President, as I had gone around the state, basically from about midsummer through to the end of the year, everywhere I went, whether I was in an urban center such as Anchorage or Homer or down in Seward, up in the Matanuska Valley, or out in the rural parts of the state, up along the Yukon, up along the Kuskokwim, out in Southwest, people were talking about two things. They were talking about the cost of energy, because our energy costs remain the highest in the nation, but they were talking about fish. Pretty basic stuff. Fuel and fish. Food. And so when we had a disaster this summer, it was an imperative around our state. We, in September of this past year, had an official declaration from the Secretary of Commerce, actually the acting Secretary of Commerce, Rebecca Blank, recognized this fish disaster. And this is a disaster that is statutorily authorized by Sections 308 of the Interjurisdictional Fisheries Act and Section 312 of the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act. These are designations that are statutorily authorized. These are not earmarks. They are not to be labeled as pork or something special for an area. These are disasters subject to a statutory authorization, a process that has been clearly laid out, authorized in law for fish failures, that requires affirmative action from the Secretary of Commerce. The Secretary has taken that action. Congress then needs to do its part by funding for these disasters. Now, I mentioned at the outset that some of my colleagues might not appreciate the importance of these fish disasters. But again, these disasters are not less important than disasters that we provide for other industries, such as drought disaster or drought assistance for our farmers. And I think that the acting secretary, when she signed these fisheries designations, she recognized them for essentially what they are: fish droughts. Fish droughts in our rivers and our oceans, and responded to the fisheries disasters not only in my state of Alaska, but she also moved forward with disaster determinations for Rhode Island, for New York, for Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Mississippi. And that disaster declaration that the acting secretary advanced opens the door then for the financial assistance from the federal government. Well, Mr. President, you might notice that those funds were not included in this disaster relief bill. That does not mean that I will back down from doing my best to make sure that the disaster that Alaska faced with its fisheries, and that so many of our other states faced with their fisheries, that these needs will not be addressed. We didn't advance it in this package. It's important that the Sandy provision move forward, and that's why I eventually cast my vote in support of it. But I know that many of my colleagues, the senator from Rhode Island is with me tonight. I know the senator from New Hampshire is very concerned about it. The senator from Maine is very concerned about it. I think it's fair to say that we will continue our efforts to ensure that the disasters that our fishermen have faced will be addressed as is statutorily provided in law. We will work to find that funding to make sure that disasters, however they present themselves in this country, whether it's storm, flood, drought, hurricane, earthquake, that they are addressed. So I commit to working with my colleagues to continue to find those sources of funding so we address these revenues. I note that my colleague from Rhode Island is here, and I know he too wanted to address this important issue.